The desert air shimmered with heat as Commander Sarah Chun adjusted her headset for the third time in 10 minutes. The forward operating base buzzed with tension that morning, October 15th, 2019. Intelligence reports have been flooding in since dawn about enemy convoy movements near the Syrian border. Sarah, a 34-year-old missile systems commander with 12 years of military experience, had seen enough combat to know when something big was brewing. Sarah stood in the command center, her eyes scanning multiple screens showing satellite feeds, radar signatures, and communication channels. Her team of 8 specialists worked quietly around her, each focused on their assigned systems. The morning briefing had been clear. Hostile forces were moving advanced weaponry through the region, and their convoy needed to be stopped before reaching populated areas. The base commander, Colonel Martinez, approached Sarah with a grim expression. "Chun, we've got confirmation. 3 armored vehicles with surface-to-air missiles are heading toward the refugee camp 12 miles east. Intelligence says they're planning to set up a launch position by nightfall." Sarah nodded, her mind already calculating trajectories and timing. "Sir, our Patriot system is locked and loaded. We have clear line of sight, and weather conditions are optimal." She paused, checking her watch. "Enemy convoy should be in our targeting range within 45 minutes, based on their current speed." The colonel studied the tactical display. "This is a precision strike, Chun. Civilian populations are scattered throughout that area. We need clean hits with zero collateral damage." His voice carried the weight of command decisions that had kept him awake for years. Sarah had trained for moments like this since joining the military. Growing up in a small California town, she had always been fascinated by technology and problem-solving. Her father, a mechanical engineer, had encouraged her interest in how complex systems worked. After high school, she chose military service over college, drawn by the opportunity to work with cutting-edge defense technology. Her early years in the service had been challenging. As one of few women in missile systems, she faced skepticism from some colleagues. But Sarah's technical skills and calm under pressure quickly earned respect. She could troubleshoot complex guidance systems faster than most senior technicians and had an intuitive understanding of ballistic calculations that impressed her instructors. The command center's main screen displayed real-time footage from a surveillance drone. 3 dark shapes moved across the desert landscape, kicking up dust clouds in their wake. Sarah recognized the vehicle profiles immediately. Modified T-72 tanks with additional missile mounting systems. These weren't standard military vehicles, but sophisticated hybrid platforms designed for maximum destructive capability. "Weapons hot," Sarah announced to her team. Specialist Rodriguez confirmed missile system status, while Sergeant Park monitored radar signatures. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone understood the stakes. Success meant protecting thousands of innocent lives. Failure could result in catastrophic civilian casualties. Sarah's finger hovered over the targeting console as she watched the enemy convoy navigate a rocky outcropping. The vehicles moved in formation, maintaining precise spacing that suggested experienced crews. These weren't amateur fighters, but professionally trained operators who understood tactical movement. The communication system crackled with updates from reconnaissance teams. "Command, this is Eagle Eye. Convoy has stopped near grid reference 334 to 127. They appear to be setting up defensive positions around their vehicles." Colonel Martinez leaned closer to Sarah. "They're preparing for something. We need to act fast before they establish a hardened position." Sarah's training had taught her that stationary targets were easier to hit, but also more likely to have activated defensive systems. Sarah began the targeting sequence, her hands moving with practiced precision across the control interface. Years of training had made these movements automatic, but she never allowed herself to become complacent. Each mission required complete focus and attention to detail. The first indication of trouble came from Specialist Rodriguez. "Ma'am, I'm seeing anomalous readings in the guidance system. Primary navigation module is showing error codes." Sarah felt her stomach tighten, but her voice remained steady as she ordered immediate diagnostics. The main targeting computer displayed a cascade of warning messages. Sarah had seen technical problems before, but never during an active engagement with time-critical constraints. Her team scrambled to identify the source of the malfunction while enemy forces continued their preparations. Talk to me, Rodriguez. What are we dealing with? Sarah moved between workstations, checking system displays and backup protocols. The missile guidance system was the heart of their operation, and without it, they were essentially defenseless against the approaching threat. Rodriguez's face was tense with concentration as he ran through diagnostic procedures. Ma'am, it looks like a software corruption in the primary targeting matrix. The system can't maintain lock on moving targets, and trajectory calculations are showing errors of plus or minus 30 meters. 30 meters might as well have been 30 miles when dealing with precision strikes near civilian areas. Sarah knew that standard protocol would be to abort the mission and wait for technical support, but they didn't have that luxury. The enemy convoy wouldn't wait for American forces to repair their equipment. Colonel Martinez appeared at Sarah's shoulder. Options, Commander? His question carried the weight of command responsibility and the lives of everyone depending on their success. Sarah's mind raced through alternatives. Backup systems, manual override procedures, and contingency plans that she had studied but never hoped to use in actual combat. The enemy vehicles were now clearly visible on multiple camera feeds, their crews moving with purpose as they prepared their own weapon systems. Sir, I need 15 minutes to attempt a manual recalibration. It's not standard procedure, but I might be able to bypass the corrupted software and establish direct control. Sarah had never attempted such a procedure under combat conditions, but her understanding of the missile guidance system was comprehensive enough to make it theoretically possible. Time was their enemy now as much as the forces moving across the desert. Every minute of delay gave the hostile convoy more opportunity to establish defensive positions or, worse, to begin targeting civilian areas. Sarah could feel the weight of expectation from her team and the broader implications of mission failure. The command center fell into focused silence as Sarah began working on the guidance system override. Her fingers moved across manual input controls that were rarely used in modern operations. These backup systems have been designed for exactly this type of emergency, but implementing them required intimate knowledge of the missile platform's core programming. Specialist Park monitored enemy communications while Sarah worked. Ma'am, intercepted radio traffic suggests they're preparing to launch within the hour. Their timeline has accelerated. This news added urgency to an already critical situation. Sarah paused in her work to study the tactical situation. The enemy convoy had positioned themselves in a natural depression that provided cover from most angles of attack. Their defensive positioning showed tactical sophistication and suggested they were prepared for American intervention. As she continued the manual override procedures, Sarah reflected on the path that had brought her to this moment. Military service had provided structure and purpose that she had craved as a young person. The technical challenges of missile systems satisfied her analytical mind, while the mission of protecting others gave deeper meaning to her work. Her parents had worried when she chose military service over college, but Sarah had never regretted the decision. The military had provided education, training, and opportunities that shaped her into the officer she had become. More importantly, it had given her the chance to serve something larger than herself. The guidance system slowly responded to Sarah's manual inputs. Error messages began clearing from the display as she bypassed corrupted software modules and established direct hardware connections. It was delicate work that required both technical knowledge and intuitive understanding of the system's behavior. Colonel Martinez checked his watch. Chun, we're running out of time. Intelligence reports suggest the enemy is preparing to move again within 20 minutes. The pressure was mounting, but Sarah maintained her focus on the technical challenge in front of her. Finally, the guidance system showed green status lights across all primary functions. Sarah had successfully bypassed the software corruption and established manual control over the missile targeting system. But This was only the beginning of the challenge they faced. System is operational, sir. But we're running on backup protocols with reduced accuracy. I'll need to manually calculate and adjust for wind, temperature, and target movement in real time. Sarah's voice was steady despite the enormous responsibility she was accepting. The enemy convoy was moving again, their vehicles spreading into attack formation as they approached their intended target area. Time for preparation had run out, and the moment of truth was approaching rapidly. Sarah Chun found herself facing the most critical decision of her military career, with thousands of lives hanging in the balance. Sarah's hands were steady as she began manual targeting calculations, but inside, her heart was racing. The backup guidance system required her to input every variable manually: wind speed, atmospheric pressure, target velocity, and predicted movement patterns. One mistake could send the missiles into civilian areas or allow the enemy convoy to escape and threaten innocent lives. The enemy vehicles had resumed movement, traveling in a staggered formation that made targeting more complex. Sarah watched their progress on the main display while simultaneously running calculations on her targeting computer. The lead vehicle was a modified T-72 tank with additional armor plating and what appeared to be a multiple rocket launcher mounted on top. "Rodriguez, give me real-time atmospheric data," Sarah commanded while her fingers flew across the manual input controls. The specialist immediately began feeding her wind speed readings, temperature variations, and air density measurements. In normal operations, the automated system would process this information instantly, but now Sarah had to incorporate each variable manually. Colonel Martinez stood behind her, monitoring both the tactical situation and Sarah's progress. "Chun, how long until you can engage?" His voice remained calm, but Sarah could hear the underlying tension. Intelligence reports indicated that the enemy convoy was less than 30 minutes from their attack position. "Sir, I need 3 more minutes to finalize targeting solutions for all 3 vehicles," Sarah replied without taking her eyes off her displays. She was calculating attack angles that would ensure each missile struck its target while avoiding nearby structures that could house civilians. The second enemy vehicle was proving particularly challenging to target. It traveled erratically, changing speed and direction at irregular intervals. Sarah realized the driver was following countermissile procedures, making their vehicle harder to track and target. This level of tactical sophistication confirmed that they were facing experienced military operators, not irregular fighters. Sergeant Park monitored radio intercepts from the enemy convoy. "Ma'am, they're discussing target acquisition. Sounds like they're identifying specific buildings in the refugee camp." This intelligence made the urgency of the situation even more acute. The enemy wasn't just positioning for defense. They were actively preparing to attack civilian targets. Sarah's training had covered manual targeting procedures, but she had never imagined implementing them under such pressure. The backup system required her to essentially become a human computer, processing multiple data streams simultaneously while maintaining accuracy that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The command center's atmospheric monitor beeped softly as wind conditions changed. Sarah immediately adjusted her calculations, factoring in the new variables that could affect missile trajectory. In automated mode, these adjustments would happen instantaneously, but manual operation required constant vigilance and recalculation. "First target locked," Sarah announced as she completed calculations for the lead enemy vehicle. The targeting computer showed a green confirmation light, indicating that her manual inputs had produced a viable firing solution. But she still needed to establish locks on the remaining 2 vehicles before she could begin the engagement sequence. The third enemy vehicle had taken a position behind a rocky outcropping, using the natural terrain as cover. Sarah studied the tactical display, looking for angles of attack that would allow her missiles to reach the target despite the geographical obstacles. The manual targeting system required her to plot a more complex trajectory that would arc over the rocks. Colonel Martinez received an update from aerial reconnaissance. "Chun, Drone footage shows the enemy is setting up their launch systems. We're looking at a 20-minute window before they're operational. The colonel's words added pressure to an already intense situation, but Sarah maintained her focus on the technical challenge. Sarah's second target lock proved more difficult than the first. The erratically moving vehicle required her to predict its location several minutes in the future, when her missiles would actually reach the target area. She had to factor in the vehicle's behavioral patterns, likely escape routes, and the crew's tactical training level. Specialist Rodriguez provided continuous atmospheric updates as Sarah worked. Ma'am, wind shear at 3,000 feet is increasing, adjusting for crosswinds of 15 knots from a southeast. Sarah incorporated this data into her targeting calculations, knowing that even small errors could cause mission failure. The mental calculations required intense concentration. Sarah found herself drawing on mathematical skills she hadn't used since her advanced training courses. Each targeting solution involved complex ballistic equations that normally required computer assistance. Now she was performing these calculations manually while monitoring a rapidly evolving tactical situation. Second target locked, Sarah reported as her calculations for the erratic vehicle reached successful completion. The targeting computer confirmed her solution with another green light, but she noticed that her accuracy margins were tighter than she would prefer. The manual system simply couldn't match the precision of automated targeting. The final enemy vehicle presented the greatest challenge. Its position behind the rocky outcropping required a high-angle trajectory that would test the limits of her missile's maneuverability. Sarah studied topographical maps of the target area, looking for the optimal attack angle that would ensure target destruction without risking collateral damage. Colonel Martinez checked his watch again. "Chin, what's your status?" "We're running out of time." Sarah could hear the strain in his voice as the tactical situation continued to deteriorate. Every minute of delay gave the enemy more opportunity to establish defensive positions or begin their own attack. "Sir, working on the final targeting solution now. The terrain is complicated, but I think I can thread the needle." Sarah's confidence came from her deep understanding of missile guidance systems and years of training in complex targeting scenarios. But she had never faced a situation that combined technical failure with such critical time pressure. The command center's communication system crackled with updates from field units. "Command, this is Ground Observer 7. Enemy vehicles have stopped and are deploying launch equipment. Estimate 15 minutes until they're operational." This report made it clear that time was running out rapidly. Sarah's fingers moved across the targeting controls with practiced precision as she calculated the complex trajectory required for the third vehicle. The missile would need to follow a precise arc that cleared the rocky outcropping while maintaining enough velocity for target penetration. It was a challenging shot under any circumstances, made more difficult by the manual targeting system's limitations. The mental pressure was intense, but Sarah had learned to compartmentalize stress during her military training. She focused entirely on the technical problem in front of her, trusting her team to monitor the broader tactical situation while she completed the targeting solutions. "Rodriguez, confirm atmospheric data for high-angle trajectory," Sarah requested as she finalized her calculations for the third target. The specialist quickly provided updated information about wind patterns at different altitudes, data that was crucial for the complex missile path she was planning. Finally, the third targeting solution came together. Sarah's calculations showed a viable path that would allow her missile to reach the hidden vehicle while avoiding civilian structures and natural obstacles. The computer confirmed her solution with a third green light, indicating that all targets were now locked and ready for engagement. "All targets locked and confirmed, sir," Sarah reported to Colonel Martinez. "Missiles are armed and ready for sequential launch." The colonel nodded grimly, understanding that they were about to cross the point of no return in their engagement with enemy forces. But as Sarah prepared to initiate the launch sequence, new alarms began sounding throughout the command center. The enemy convoy had apparently detected American targeting systems and was implementing countermeasures designed to disrupt missile guidance. Sarah watched in dismay as her carefully calculated targeting solutions began showing error warnings. "Sir, "They're jamming our guidance systems," Sergeant Park reported from his electronic warfare station. "I'm seeing broad-spectrum interference designed to disrupt missile navigation." This new development threatened to undo all of Sarah's manual targeting work and leave them defenseless against the approaching threat. Sarah's mind raced as she considered their options. The enemy jamming was sophisticated enough to interfere with normal missile guidance, but her manual system might be able to operate despite the electronic warfare. It would require her to maintain target locks manually throughout the entire engagement, a procedure she had never attempted under combat conditions. "Can we push through the jamming?" Colonel Martinez asked. Sarah studied her displays, analyzing the interference patterns and looking for ways to maintain targeting despite the enemy countermeasures. "Sir, I think I can maintain manual locks if I stay actively engaged throughout the launch sequence. But it means I'll be flying these missiles manually from launch to impact." The procedure Sarah was proposing was extremely dangerous and had never been attempted during actual combat operations. The enemy jamming intensified as their electronic warfare systems reached full power. Sarah could see her targeting locks fluctuating as the interference tried to disrupt her manual controls. But her deep understanding of the missile guidance system allowed her to maintain targeting despite the electronic assault. Colonel Martinez made the critical decision that would determine the mission's outcome. "Chun, you have authorization to engage. Take them down before they can launch on civilian targets." Sarah acknowledged the order and began the launch sequence that would test every skill she had developed during her military career. The moment of truth had arrived. Sarah Chun was about to attempt something that had never been done before, manually guiding multiple precision missiles through enemy jamming to destroy a sophisticated convoy before they could attack innocent civilians. The success or failure of this unprecedented operation would depend entirely on her technical skills and ability to perform under the most extreme pressure possible. The launch sequence began with a deep rumble that Sarah felt in her chest as the first missile left its launcher. Through her headset, she could hear the guidance system's electronic heartbeat as the weapon began its journey toward the enemy convoy. But instead of the smooth, automated flight path she was accustomed to monitoring, Sarah now had direct control over every aspect of the missile's flight. The enemy jamming immediately tried to seize control of her missile's navigation system. Sarah watched her displays as waves of electronic interference attempted to confuse the weapon's guidance computer. But her manual override system bypassed the automated components that were vulnerable to jamming, giving her direct access to the missile's flight controls. "First missile away and maintaining manual guidance," Sarah reported to Colonel Martinez while her hands moved across the control interface. She was essentially flying the missile like a remote-controlled aircraft, making constant adjustments to keep it on course toward the lead enemy vehicle. The targeting display showed her missile's progress as a bright dot moving across a digital map of the battlefield. Sarah had to continuously adjust for wind conditions, atmospheric changes, and the target vehicle's movement while simultaneously preparing to launch her second missile. The mental workload was enormous, requiring her to process multiple data streams while maintaining precise control. Specialist Rodriguez monitored the enemy's electronic warfare efforts. "Ma'am, they're increasing jamming power and trying to break your manual link. Signal strength is holding, but they're adapting their countermeasures." Sarah could see the interference patterns on her displays, but her manual system was proving more resilient than the enemy had anticipated. The first missile was now 30 seconds from impact when Sarah noticed the lead enemy vehicle beginning evasive maneuvers. The tank's driver had apparently detected the incoming threat and was attempting to escape the missile's targeting cone. Sarah immediately began adjusting her weapon's trajectory to compensate for the target's movement. "Target 1 is maneuvering," Sarah announced while making rapid course corrections. The manual guidance system allowed her to respond to the enemy's evasive actions much faster than automated systems could have managed. Her missile adjusted its flight path smoothly, maintaining lock on the moving target despite the driver's best efforts to escape. Colonel Martinez watched the tactical display with intense focus. Chun, how long until second missile launch? Sarah checked her targeting computer while continuing to guide the first weapon. The second enemy vehicle was still moving erratically, but she had maintained her targeting solution despite the electronic jamming. Sir, launching second missile in 15 seconds, Sarah replied, while making final adjustments to the first weapon's trajectory. The lead enemy vehicle had taken cover behind a sand dune, but Sarah's manual guidance allowed her to program a top attack profile that would strike from above, avoiding the vehicle's frontal armor. The second missile launched with the same deep rumble, adding another layer of complexity to Sarah's task. She now had 2 weapons in flight, each requiring constant manual adjustments to maintain course toward their targets. Her hands moved between different control interfaces as she juggled multiple guidance systems simultaneously. The enemy jamming reached peak intensity as their electronic warfare operators realized the American missiles were not responding to their countermeasures. Sarah could see her displays flickering as the interference tried to overwhelm her manual control systems. But years of training had prepared her for this exact scenario. Both missiles maintaining guidance lock, Sarah reported while fighting through the electronic interference. The enemy's jamming was sophisticated, but it had been designed to disrupt automated systems, not manual control. Sarah's direct connection to her weapons gave her an advantage that the enemy hadn't anticipated. The first missile was now 10 seconds from impact when disaster nearly struck. A particularly intense burst of jamming briefly interrupted Sarah's control signal, causing the weapon to drift off course toward a structure that could potentially house civilians. Sarah's training kicked in instantly as she regained control and corrected the missile's path. First missile back on course, she announced while sweat beaded on her forehead. The near miss had been terrifying, but Sarah's quick reaction had prevented a catastrophic error. The missile resumed its attack trajectory toward the lead enemy vehicle, which was still attempting evasive maneuvers behind the sand dune. Sergeant Park provided updates on enemy communications. Ma'am, intercepted radio traffic indicates they know our missiles are incoming. They're trying to accelerate their own launch preparations. This intelligence meant that time was even more critical than Sarah had realized. The enemy was racing to complete their attack before her missiles could reach them. The second missile required constant attention as it flew through increasingly turbulent atmospheric conditions. Sarah had to adjust for wind shear, temperature variations, and the target vehicle's continued erratic movement. The mental calculations required to maintain manual guidance were exhausting, but she couldn't afford to lose focus. First missile impact in 5 seconds, Sarah announced while continuing to guide the second weapon. The targeting display showed her first missile approaching the lead enemy vehicle from a steep angle that would penetrate the tank's relatively thin top armor. The enemy driver's evasive maneuvers had been skillful, but ultimately unsuccessful. The command center fell silent as everyone watched the tactical display. Sarah maintained her focus on both missiles while the first weapon completed its final approach to the target. Years of training had prepared her for this moment, but the reality of combat was more intense than any simulation. The first missile struck with devastating precision, exactly where Sarah had guided it despite the enemy's evasive actions and jamming attempts. The explosion was visible on the drone feed as a bright flash followed by a column of smoke rising from the destroyed vehicle. Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction before refocusing on the second missile, which was still 30 seconds from its target. First target destroyed, Colonel Martinez confirmed while studying the aftermath of the strike. The lead enemy vehicle was completely disabled, its weapon systems destroyed, and crew neutralized. But 2 enemy vehicles remained operational, and they were now fully aware that they were under attack. The second enemy vehicle had stopped its erratic movement and was now racing directly toward the civilian area at maximum speed. The driver apparently hoped to reach a populated zone where American forces would be reluctant to engage. Sarah realized she needed to intercept the vehicle before it could endanger innocent lives. Target 2 is making a run for the civilian area, Sarah reported while adjusting her second missile's trajectory. The weapon would need to intercept the racing vehicle before it could reach the refugee camp, requiring precise timing and trajectory calculations that pushed her manual guidance system to its limits. The enemy's electronic jamming continued at maximum intensity, but Sarah had learned to work through the interference. Her displays flickered and wavered, but she maintained control of the second missile while beginning targeting procedures for the third weapon. The workload was approaching the limits of human capability. Specialist Rodriguez provided critical atmospheric data as Sarah guided the second missile through its final approach. Ma'am, crosswinds are increasing at low altitude. Recommend trajectory adjustment of 3 degrees east. Sarah immediately incorporated this information into her manual guidance, keeping the weapon on course toward the fleeing enemy vehicle. The second missile's impact was as precise as the first, striking the racing enemy tank just as it reached the edge of the safe engagement zone. Sarah had timed the intercept perfectly, destroying the vehicle while it was still far enough from civilian areas to ensure no collateral damage. The explosion lit up the desert landscape as another enemy threat was eliminated. Second target destroyed, Sarah announced while immediately shifting her attention to the third enemy vehicle. This final target remained hidden behind the rocky outcropping, but intelligence reports suggested they were nearly ready to launch their own attack on civilian targets. Sarah needed to complete her mission before the enemy could execute their plan. The third missile launch would be the most challenging yet. Sarah had to program a complex high-angle trajectory that would carry the weapon over the rocky terrain while maintaining enough velocity for target penetration. The manual calculations required intense concentration as she factored in terrain elevation, atmospheric conditions, and the target's protected position. Colonel Martinez monitored the broader tactical situation while Sarah prepared her final attack. Chun, intelligence indicates the third vehicle is preparing to fire. We need to take them out in the next few minutes. The urgency in his voice reflected the critical nature of their situation. Sarah began the launch sequence for her third missile, knowing that this weapon represented their last chance to prevent the enemy from attacking civilian targets. The complex trajectory she had calculated would test both her manual guidance skills and the missile's maneuverability as it navigated over challenging terrain toward a well-protected target. The third missile left its launcher just as reports came in that the enemy vehicle was beginning its own launch preparations. Sarah found herself in a race against time, manually guiding her weapon through a complex flight path while enemy forces prepared to unleash their own devastating attack on innocent civilians. The outcome of this technological duel would determine whether thousands of lives were saved or lost. The third missile climbed steeply through the desert air as Sarah fought to maintain control against increasingly sophisticated enemy jamming. The weapon's complex trajectory required constant adjustment as it arced over the rocky outcropping that protected the final enemy vehicle. Sarah's displays showed interference patterns unlike anything she had encountered in training, but her manual override system continued to respond to her commands. Third missile maintaining course, Sarah reported while monitoring multiple data streams simultaneously. The weapon was approaching the highest point of its trajectory, where atmospheric conditions were most unpredictable and enemy jamming was most effective. She had to compensate for wind shear, temperature variations, and electronic interference while calculating the precise moment to begin the missile's descent toward its hidden target. Specialist Rodriguez provided critical updates on enemy activity. Ma'am, thermal imaging shows the third vehicle has elevated its launch platform. They're in final preparation stages for firing. Sarah realized she was literally racing against time as both sides prepared to unleash devastating weapons with dramatically different targets. The rocky outcropping that concealed the enemy vehicle created a complex targeting challenge that pushed Sarah's manual guidance system to its absolute limits. Her missile needed to follow a precise path that would clear the terrain obstacles while maintaining enough velocity and accuracy for target destruction. The calculations required split-second timing and perfect execution. Colonel Martinez received urgent intelligence updates from field observers. Chun, we're getting reports that civilian buses are moving through the target area. The enemy appears to be timing their attack to maximize casualties. This information added a horrifying dimension to the tactical situation and emphasized the critical importance of Sarah's mission success. Sarah's missile reached the peak of its trajectory and began its descent toward the hidden enemy vehicle. The weapon's guidance system struggled against intense jamming as it navigated through the most challenging phase of its flight. Sarah had to make constant micro-adjustments to keep the missile on course while managing atmospheric effects that threatened to push it off target. The enemy's electronic warfare reached maximum intensity as their operators realized the American missile was approaching despite their countermeasures. Sarah's displays went nearly white with interference as hostile forces attempted to overwhelm her manual control systems. But her deep understanding of the guidance technology allowed her to maintain control even through the electronic assault. Missile guidance holding despite heavy jamming, Sarah announced while fighting to maintain targeting lock. Her hands moved across the control interface with practiced precision as she filtered out electronic noise and focused on the essential navigation data. Years of training had prepared her for this exact scenario, but the reality was more challenging than any simulation. Sergeant Park monitored enemy communications with growing urgency. "Ma'am, intercepted radio confirms they're beginning final launch countdown. We have less than 90 seconds before they fire on civilian targets." Sarah absorbed this information while continuing to guide her missile through its complex descent trajectory toward the concealed enemy position. The rocky terrain created aerodynamic turbulence that threatened to destabilize Sarah's missile as it approached the target area. She had to compensate for unpredictable wind patterns created by the jagged landscape while maintaining the precise flight path required for target penetration. The manual guidance system required her constant attention as environmental conditions changed rapidly. 30 seconds to impact, Sarah called out, while making final trajectory adjustments. The enemy vehicle remained hidden behind the rocks, but her targeting calculations indicated the missile was on course for a direct strike. However, the enemy's jamming continued to intensify as their electronic warfare operators made desperate attempts to disrupt American targeting. The command center's atmosphere was electric with tension as everyone realized the mission's outcome would be determined in the next few moments. Sarah represented their only hope of preventing a catastrophic attack on civilian targets, and her manual guidance system was performing beyond its design specifications under the most extreme conditions possible. Sarah's missile began its final approach to the target area when new complications arose. Intelligence reports indicated that the enemy vehicle had activated point defense systems designed to intercept incoming missiles. These close-range weapons represented a final layer of protection that Sarah's missile would have to penetrate to reach its target. Point defenses are active around the target, Specialist Rodriguez reported while monitoring enemy electronic signatures. They're tracking our missile and preparing to engage. Sarah realized she needed to implement evasive maneuvers that would confuse the enemy's defensive systems while maintaining her weapon's trajectory toward the target vehicle. The manual guidance system allowed Sarah to program irregular flight patterns that automated systems couldn't have executed. She directed her missile through a series of subtle course changes designed to mask its true target while avoiding the enemy's defensive weapons. The complex maneuvers required precise timing and perfect coordination between multiple guidance systems. Enemy point defense weapons opened fire as Sarah's missile entered their engagement zone. The command center's displays showed streams of tracer fire and small explosions as defensive systems attempted to destroy the incoming American weapon. Sarah watched tensely as her missile navigated through the hostile fire while maintaining course toward its target. "Missile is taking defensive fire, but maintaining trajectory," Sarah reported while continuing to guide the weapon through enemy countermeasures. The point defense systems were sophisticated, but her manual control allowed her to implement evasive patterns that confused their targeting computers. The missile weaved through hostile fire like a fighter aircraft, avoiding surface-to-air missiles. Colonel Martinez monitored reports from field observers as the tactical situation reached its climax. Chun, enemy vehicle is rotating to firing position. Intelligence estimates 30 seconds until they launch. Sarah felt the weight of thousands of lives depending on her ability to complete this unprecedented manual guidance mission under impossible conditions. The enemy's final desperate jamming attempt nearly succeeded in breaking Sarah's control link as her missile approached the target area. Every display in the command center flickered as hostile electronic warfare systems reached maximum power in a last-ditch effort to save their concealed vehicle. But Sarah's manual override system proved more resilient than the enemy had anticipated. Guidance link holding, Sarah announced while fighting through the most intense electronic interference she had ever encountered. Her training had covered jamming resistance, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of manually flying a missile through such sophisticated countermeasures. Only her deep technical knowledge and years of experience allowed her to maintain control. Sarah's missile cleared the rocky outcropping and acquired visual contact with a hidden enemy vehicle for the first time. The targeting display showed a modified tank with an elevated missile launcher that was clearly preparing to fire. Enemy crew members were visible around the vehicle, making final preparations for their attack on civilian targets. The point defense systems made their final attempt to destroy Sarah's incoming missile as it entered the terminal attack phase. Streams of gunfire and small missiles filled the air around her weapon as enemy defensive systems engaged at maximum rate. Sarah guided her missile through the hostile fire while maintaining its attack trajectory toward the enemy vehicle. 10 seconds to impact, Sarah called out while making final guidance adjustments. Her missile had survived enemy jamming, point defenses, and complex terrain to reach the target area. But the mission's success would ultimately depend on these final moments as the weapon approached its target through intense defensive fire. The enemy vehicle's missile launcher was now clearly elevated and pointing toward the civilian area when Sarah's missile completed its complex journey. Despite sophisticated jamming, point defense systems, and challenging terrain, her manual guidance had delivered the weapon precisely to its target. The explosion that followed eliminated the final threat to innocent civilian lives. Third target destroyed. Colonel Martinez confirmed as the tactical display showed the successful completion of Sarah's unprecedented mission. The enemy convoy had been completely neutralized through manual missile guidance that had never been attempted under combat conditions. Sarah had not only saved thousands of lives, but had proven that human skill and determination could overcome even the most advanced technological challenges. But as the immediate crisis passed, Sarah realized that her actions had established new precedents for missile guidance and electronic warfare. The manual override techniques she had developed during this mission would become part of military training programs and defensive strategies. Her quick thinking under pressure had not only prevented catastrophe, but had advanced military technology in ways that would protect future operations. The aftermath of the engagement would bring recognition and new responsibilities as Sarah became known as the officer who had manually guided missiles through impossible conditions to protect civilian lives. But in that moment, sitting in the command center with her hands still on the guidance controls, Sarah felt only relief that the mission was complete and the threat to innocent people had been eliminated. The silence in the command center was profound as the last explosion echoed across the desert landscape. Sarah Chun slowly removed her hands from the manual guidance controls, her fingers trembling slightly from the intense concentration required during the unprecedented mission. Around her, the team stared at their displays in amazement, processing what they had just witnessed and accomplished together. Colonel Martinez was the first to speak, his voice filled with a mixture of relief and admiration. "Outstanding work, Commander Chun. I've never seen anything like that in 30 years of military service." Sarah nodded acknowledgement while continuing to monitor the aftermath displays. ensuring that all enemy threats had been completely neutralized and no additional hostile forces were approaching the area. The drone feeds showed the smoking remains of all 3 enemy vehicles, their sophisticated weapons systems destroyed before they could launch their planned attack on civilian targets. Intelligence estimates suggested that Sarah's manual missile guidance had prevented casualties that could have numbered in the thousands. The refugee camp remained safe, unaware of how close they had come to devastating attack. Specialist Rodriguez began shutting down the manual override systems that Sarah had used during the engagement. "Ma'am, all guidance systems are secure." The manual overrides performed beyond specification under conditions they were never designed to handle. Sarah felt pride in her team's technical competence and their ability to adapt to unexpected challenges under extreme pressure. Over the following hours, reports began arriving from field teams that confirmed the complete success of the mission. The enemy convoy had been eliminated with precision strikes that caused no collateral damage to civilian structures or personnel. Sarah's manual guidance had achieved accuracy levels that exceeded normal automated system performance despite operating under the most challenging conditions imaginable. The technical aspects of what Sarah had accomplished began attracting attention from military leadership and defense contractors. Manual missile guidance through sophisticated electronic warfare had never been successfully demonstrated under combat conditions. Sarah's improvised techniques had proven that human operators could overcome technological limitations through skill, training, and innovation. Colonel Martinez informed Sarah that preliminary reports were already being forwarded to Pentagon officials and defense research organizations. "Chen, what you did today is going to change how we think about missile defense and electronic warfare. Your manual guidance techniques need to be documented and incorporated into training programs." Sarah spent the next several days working with technical specialists to document the procedures she had developed during the crisis. The manual override systems that had been designed as emergency backups proved far more capable than anyone had realized when operated by skilled technicians with deep system knowledge. Sarah's innovations would become standard procedures for future operations. The investigation into the original guidance system failure revealed a sophisticated cyber attack that had targeted the automated components of the missile platform. Enemy forces had apparently planted malicious software designed to disable American missile systems at critical moments. Sarah's manual override had not only saved the mission, but had provided valuable intelligence about enemy cyber warfare capabilities. Defense contractors began studying Sarah's manual guidance techniques to develop new hybrid systems that combined automated efficiency with manual backup capabilities. The lessons learned from her improvised procedures would influence missile guidance technology for years to come. Sarah found herself consulting with engineers and programmers who were designing next-generation weapon systems. Sarah's commanding officers recommended her for the Distinguished Service Medal, recognizing her exceptional performance under pressure and her innovation in developing new tactical procedures. The citation emphasized not only her technical skills, but also her quick thinking and dedication to protecting civilian lives. The award ceremony would bring national attention to her achievements. The story of the mission began spreading through military circles as an example of individual expertise overcoming technological failure. Training instructors incorporated elements of Sarah's techniques into advanced courses for missile system operators. Her ability to manually guide multiple weapons through complex trajectories became a case study in human-machine interface design. But Sarah remained focused on the human dimension of her achievement. The refugee camp that had been threatened by the enemy convoy contained families who had already fled violence in other regions. Her successful mission meant that these innocent people would not face additional trauma and loss. The protection of civilian lives was what gave meaning to her technical accomplishments. Sarah's parents traveled to the awards ceremony, finally understanding the significance of their daughter's choice to pursue military service. Her father, the engineer who had encouraged her early interest in technology, was amazed by how she had combined technical knowledge with tactical innovation under pressure. Her mother expressed pride in Sarah's dedication to protecting others through her service. The media attention following the award ceremony brought Sarah opportunities to speak about military technology and the importance of human operators in increasingly automated systems. She emphasized that technology should enhance human capabilities rather than replace them, using her mission as an example of how skilled operators could achieve results that pure automation could not match. Sarah's promotion to major came with new responsibilities for developing advanced training programs for missile system operators. She worked with technical schools and military academies to ensure that future operators would have the skills necessary to operate manual guidance systems effectively. Her curriculum emphasized both technical knowledge and decision-making under pressure. The enemy's sophisticated cyber attack on American missile systems led to comprehensive security reviews and upgrades across all military platforms. Sarah's experience demonstrated the critical importance of manual backup systems that could operate independently of network components. Her recommendations influenced defensive cyber strategies and system design principles. Years later, Sarah would look back on that October morning as the defining moment of her military career. The technical challenge had tested every skill she had developed through years of training and experience. But more importantly, the mission had demonstrated the value of human expertise, quick thinking, and dedication to protecting innocent lives. The manual guidance techniques that Sarah pioneered during the crisis became standard components of military training programs worldwide. Her innovation under pressure had not only saved lives in that specific situation, but had contributed to military capability improvements that would protect future operations. The combination of technical skill and tactical thinking that she demonstrated became a model for military professionals. Sarah continued her military service with increased focus on developing technologies that enhanced human capabilities rather than replacing them. Her experience had proven that skilled operators remained essential even in highly automated systems. She advocated for training programs that emphasized both technical competence and creative problem-solving under pressure. The refugee families whose lives Sarah had saved would never know her name or understand the technical complexity of what she had accomplished on their behalf. But Sarah found satisfaction in knowing that her skills and dedication had protected innocent people from violence and loss. The mission represented everything she valued about military service, using advanced technology and professional expertise to defend those who could not protect themselves. As Sarah reflected on her career and the path that had led her to that critical moment in the command center, she realized that every challenge she had faced had prepared her for that unprecedented mission. Her technical education, military training, and years of experience had converged to enable her success when it mattered most. The mission had validated her choice to dedicate her career to protecting others through military service and technological expertise. The legacy of Sarah Chen's manual missile guidance mission extended far beyond the immediate tactical success. Her innovation under pressure had advanced military technology, influenced training programs, and demonstrated the continued importance of human expertise in increasingly automated systems. Most importantly, her quick thinking and skilled execution had protected thousands of innocent lives from a devastating attack that would have caused immeasurable tragedy and suffering.